السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So we're continuing on with the life of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. The first class we looked at a little bit of his lineage, his grandfather, his uncles who were scholars, the poverty that he lived in with his mother, his relationship with his mother, and his journey with knowledge and seeking knowledge, the scholars that he studied with. And we looked at 5 specifically, the ones that had the greatest influence on the Imam rahimahullah. And we said that total, it is estimated he had about 414 teachers, scholars that he studied with. Amongst them was a woman that he studied with as well. And we said that today we're going to start with the fitna of the creation of the Quran, inshallah. So to understand a number of things, first of all, the fitna started at the time of Al-Ma'mun. He's the Khalifa where the fitna first started during his reign. Al-Ma'mun, of course, is the son of Harun al-Rashid. So Harun al-Rashid had 3 sons, Al-Ma'mun, Al-Mu'tasim, and Al-Wathiq. These were his 3 sons. And the fitna ended at the time of Al-Wathiq. So it continued for the time, during the reign of 3 different khulafa. So Al-Ma'mun is, like we said, Al-Ma'mun, and don't forget the name, Al-Ma'mun is the one, in whose reign the fitna started. His description is that he was educated, and he loved knowledge, and he encouraged the scholars and anything related to ilm and studying and so on and so forth. One of the things, and by the way, Harun al-Rashid also had Al-Amin. He had Al-Amin and then Al-Ma'mun, Al-Mu'tasim, Al-Wathiq. But Al-Amin was from a different mother. Al-Amin, his mother was Arab. And Al-Ma'mun, his mother was non-Arab. And we're going to come to why that's an issue later on. So Al-Ma'mun, we said he was educated, he loved knowledge, he encouraged scholars, he encouraged people to study. But one thing he had is that he had the books of other cultures translated, and he gathered books of the Greeks and the Persians and so on and so forth. And he would encourage discussions amongst people, but he started to become surrounded by people of strange beliefs and strange aqa'id. And they were very well spoken, they were eloquent, and he began to surround himself with these people. And he started to think like them. Specifically, we're talking about the Mu'tazila. This group, the Mu'tazila, they surrounded Al-Ma'mun. And he also gave them high positions in his office. And high positions in his government. And the problem was that when they tried to force everyone to adopt their same beliefs. So it's not like this is your belief and this is my belief. This is my belief and you have to believe what I believe as well. And anyone who didn't agree with their beliefs was considered a threat to the government. So it's not just some guy who has his own belief, but he's a threat to the government now. So the fitna, specifically that we're going to talk about, the fitna of the creation of the Quran, it was started by a man, his name was Al-Ja'd ibn Darham or Durham. And he was the mu'addib. Remember we said last time the mu'addibin were kind of almost like these tutors that you would pay for. They would come to your children and they would teach them religion and language and poetry and manners and a number of things. So Al-Ja'd ibn Durham, he was the mu'addib of Marwan ibn Muhammad, the last of the khulafa of Bani Umayyah, the last khalifa of Bani Umayyah. And Al-Ja'd had many strange ideas. And he was captured and he was sentenced to death. During the time, the governor of Iraq, his name was Khalid ibn Abdullah al-Qusri. And he, on the day of Eid al-Adha, when they had captured Al-Ja'd ibn Durham, he said at the end of the khutbah, because now the governor and the ruler typically would be the one who was the imam as well. So at the end of his Eid khutbah, he said, أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ قُومُوا فَضَحُّوا. He says, "O people, get up and make your sacrifice, your udhiyah. فَإِنِّي مُضَحِّنِ الْيَوْمِ بِالْجَعْدِ ibn Durham." So he said, today I'm making the udhiyah with Al-Ja'd ibn Durham. He was sentenced to death, and so after the Jum'ah khutbah, he got down from the minbar, and they had him slaughtered. But the ideas of this man, Al-Ja'd ibn Durham, were taken over by a man. His name was Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. And that's where Al-Jahmiyyah came from. And typically Al-Jahmiyyah are people who said things like that hellfire is not eternal, and that human beings don't have free will, and they negated the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Al-Jahm ibn Safwan we're talking about. And he also said many strange things, among which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not speak. Alright? So this man, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, said many other strange things, but he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't speak. His proof was that kalam, speech, is something which is renewed or renewable. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qadim, which means like ancient or existing for a long time. And if we say He speaks, it means that He is not qadim. So that means He doesn't speak. This was, of course, the thought of this man and the corrupt ideas that he came with. So he said Allah doesn't speak. One of the things he said. We said that Jahmiyyah generally they negate many or have things to say about many of the attributes, divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bilal, come up here. Yes, you. Any other Bilal here? Come on. Near Ahmad. Good man. So this man, Al-Jahm was the kind of man that he liked to create fitan, and he wanted to force people upon his beliefs. And Al-Jahm here, right? Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. He liked to create fitan. He liked to force people upon his beliefs. He was killed by Nasr ibn Sayyar, who was the governor of Bani Umayyah. All of this was about 10 years after Al-Ja'd ibn Durham. So Al-Ja'd ibn Durham is the first to start that, and later on Jahm ibn Safwan 10 years later being killed by one of the governors of Bani Umayyah. Now, in the Abbasid dynasty, during the reign of Harun al-Rashid, the father of Al-Ma'mun, the one that's going to start the fitna, during the reign of Harun al-Rashid, Bishr ibn Ghiyath, a man by the name of Bishr ibn Ghiyath, more popular in history as Bishr al-Marisi. He was from the heads of the Mu'tazila. And he said that the Quran is not the speech of Allah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't speak. So therefore the Quran is something that is created. This is what he started to say. The Quran is something that is created, just like everything else. He says, and now look how they present it in a way where like they're trying to respect Allah. But it turns out to be something of great disrespect. He says, we want to glorify Allah. And if we say He speaks, then we're saying that He speaks like people speak. And there is nothing like unto Him. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. See how it looks like they're trying to respect Allah Azza wa Jal? But of course, in the attempt to respect Allah Azza wa Jal, they come with a lot of disrespect in it. And it's kind of like the idea when people tell you, don't say Allah is on His throne. Because when you say Allah is on His throne, you are physically limiting Allah. You see how it sounds? It sounds like it's trying to respect Allah. You're physically limiting Allah. Don't say He's on His throne. So you tell them, okay, what do we say? They tell you, no, He's everywhere. He's physically everywhere. See, they're trying to respect Allah. Don't physically limit Allah. But if you look at the opposite of it, it's worse. So they're saying that Allah then is physically everywhere. And then you ask them everywhere in the bathroom, and they can never answer that. They're always quiet. In the bar down the street, in the church, in this place, in that place. And they're always quiet about that. But you know, historically, there are many Muslims who wrote poetry saying that even the dog and the pig is our God, is our ilah. Why did they say that? Because the dog takes up space, the pig takes up space, and Allah is physically everywhere according to them. So therefore He is, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ and ta'ala Allahu an dhalik, inside the dog and the animals and things like that. And they said, so وَمَا الْكَلْبُ وَالْخِنْزِيرُ إِلَّا إِلَهُنَا. And the dog and the pig is nothing but our ilah, and so is the rahib, like the monk in the monastery. That's our God as well. One of them, he would say, Subhani. Not Subhanallah, Subhani, because Allah is in me. And he would say, I don't know which one of us is al-mukallaf. Al-mukallaf is the person who is supposed to, who is entrusted or to worship the other. But he said, I don't know which one of us is mukallaf, because Allah is in me. So, and subhanAllah, and also, and again we're talking about Muslims now. It all started by trying to respect Allah. Don't physically limit Allah. But you reverse it, it becomes worse. One of them, he was, ulama had made takfir of this man since centuries ago. He said that when Fir'aun said to Musa, or to the people, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, I am your Lord Most High. This man, and imagine this man is supposed to be a Muslim. He said Fir'aun understood the essence of Tawheed. Tawheed here meaning everything is one with Allah instead of Allah being one. He said, now can you imagine a Muslim saying this? He said Fir'aun understood the essence of Tawheed and Musa couldn't get it. This guy is supposed to be a Muslim. So it sounds, as the way they present it, and they're being eloquent and well spoken, they present it as if they're trying to respect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you look at the opposite side of it, you see that it's actually great disrespect to Allah Azza wa Jal. So this man, Bishr al-Marisi, during the reign of Harun al-Rashid, he started to say that the Quran is not the speech of Allah because Allah doesn't speak, so it's something created like everything else. We want to glorify Allah Azza wa Jal, and if we say that He speaks, we're saying that He is like people. While Allah Azza wa Jal, there is nothing like unto Him. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ أَوْ لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Of course, the correct answer, the correct belief, obviously, when Allah says He is on His throne, we say Allah is on His throne. And we don't try to explain that away, as some people have said, because Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah Taha, الرحمن على العرش استوى. So they said, they tried to fix it because they don't want to believe that Allah is on His throne. They said استوى means istawla, mean conquered His throne. And then the scholars said, this is worse now. He conquered His throne, that means there was something there before Him that He had to conquer the throne, right? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, but is it like the way we speak? No, of course not. Any sane being understands this. If you tell someone, the camel has an eye, and the rooster has an eye, right? All right, that's the famous example. Yeah? Nobody imagines a rooster walking around with two huge camel eyes dangling out of its head, because each animal will have the same body part, but one that's befitting of that being. And so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, He speaks in a way that befits His majesty. Doesn't mean He speaks the way we speak. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears, He hears in a perfect way, not in the way we hear. And if Allah hears, He hears in the most complete way, not in the way we hear. He hears in a way that is befitting to His majesty subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even the verses that the Mu'tazila and others at the time were trying to quote, the verse itself ends with those attributes. They would say, nothing is like Allah. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. But then what's the end of the verse? وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. And He's the all-hearing, all-seeing. So even the verse that they're using, the end of it is mentioning these attributes and affirming these attributes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. So the question is, why is this a big deal to people of sound belief if someone says the Quran was created by Allah? Someone might say the Quran is created by Allah, but it's a great creation of Allah. طيب. A number of problems. Because if they say we speak, therefore Allah is not like us, so Allah doesn't speak. طيب. With the same argument, we have knowledge. Can you apply this to Allah Azza wa Jal? So they're trying to not liken Allah to the creation. So if we speak, Allah doesn't speak. طيب. If we have knowledge, what are you going to say about the knowledge of Allah? You see how it gets you into more and more trouble? It starts off like something respectful. And then, and we said they began with speech specifically because speech is renewable, and then they started to explain away all the evidences to that. Other problems, if we say the Quran is created, is that everything which is created is, or usually has its flaws. Nothing of the creation is perfect. The only thing that's perfect is Allah Azza wa Jal. All things besides Allah Azza wa Jal, they have their imperfections. So if we say the Quran, and typically in things that are created, they can be improved upon or built upon, or they're open to change and improvement, and they have an end, they die. So the Quran, no fault reaches it. And if we're saying that it's a creation of, that means it's imperfect. But the Quran, no fault reaches it. So the news of Bishr al-Marisi, this man, reaches Harun al-Rashid, the Khalifa. And Harun al-Rashid says, I've heard that Bishr al-Marisi says that the Quran is created by Allah. If Allah brings him to me, I will kill him. So Bishr then goes into hiding until Harun al-Rashid died. And when Harun al-Rashid died, Bishr al-Marisi, he emerged again and he started to spread and to convince Al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun, the Khalifa that we're talking about now, in whose time the fitna started. Now, before Al-Ma'mun, Al-Amin was the Khalifa for about 2 years. Al-Amin was also the son of Harun al-Rashid. Now, Al-Amin, we said his mother, he had an Arab mother. Now, what does that mean? Yani? What it means is that because Al-Ma'mun did not have an Arab mother, he would surround himself with philosophers and people of other religions. And suppose he had, let's say, Persian origin, or his mother was Persian, then he would be more likely to sit with people of Persian beliefs or from other lands, and he would have that inclination to sit with people from other places. So the whole idea of explaining that is not, we're not saying that, oh look, the guy with the Arab mother is better. It has nothing to do with it. As we said last time, the majority of the great scholars were of non-Arab origin. طيب. So, طيب. Harun al-Ma'mun was the Khalifa for 20 years. So, Al-Amin, just for 2 years, then he dies. So this is the son of Harun al-Rashid. Harun al-Rashid dies, Al-Amin becomes the Khalifa for 2 years, then he dies, then Al-Ma'mun takes over and he's Khalifa for 20 years. At the beginning, Al-Ma'mun, he feared to spread his thoughts and his ideas, saying the Quran is created because of men like, who remembers? La. One of the teachers of him, Aywa. And remember he tested him and they sent him someone, he tells him you lied against Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would never force people against. And he used to joke a lot, he used to have a good sense of humor. Aywa, ahsant, Yazid ibn Harun, jazakallah khair, very good. So, Al-Ma'mun, he feared to spread his thoughts and belief because of people like Yazid ibn Harun. And he believed in it, but he was not very excited about spreading it and forcing people upon it. And but he was also still described as not being very wise. Al-Ma'mun was not very wise, and he didn't have good foresight. He wasn't very foresighted. So 6 years after Imam Yazid ibn Harun, rahimahullah, he announced the fitna, or the creation of the Quran. What he should have done, he should have had people debate it and discuss it, but his idea was different. If you didn't agree and you didn't believe, you will be put in prison and beaten, or killed. So it wasn't really open to discussion, and you can believe that the Quran is the speech of Allah, while we officially believe it was the creation, one of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Ma'mun also chose a man to become his minister from the Mu'tazila. This man, he was a very biased man, and he had very little chivalry in him. He had very little muru'ah in him, and his name was Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad. We're going to be mentioning this name a lot. Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad. And he's the one who incited Al-Ma'mun to start the fitna. And we'll see that for the lifespan of 3 khulafa, he's going to be also the governor and the right-hand man of every khalifa. And he got to the point that Al-Ma'mun put in his will that when he died, Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad remains the right-hand man of the khalifa, the advisor, the governor, like that. And every time a khalifa would die, Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad would rekindle the flames of the fitna every time. So the fitna began 6 years after the death of Yazid ibn Harun, rahimahullah, when Al-Ma'mun in the year 212 after the Hijrah. This is the year 212. So, I think someone was asking why wasn't Imam al-Shafi'i mentioned in this fitna. Imam al-Shafi'i died in 204. So 212 is when Al-Ma'mun announced the creation of the Quran, and he made it the most important issue in his government. He made it part of his also wasiyah, like I said, his will to keep upon the belief, not just to keep Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad and Ishaq ibn Ibrahim and his government, but also to keep this belief of the creation of the Quran as part of the government. So Al-Ma'mun then wrote to the governor of Baghdad in his absence. So the Khalifa, Al-Ma'mun, he used to move around a lot. When he's in Baghdad, the governor would become the chief of police. And when he is gone, the chief of police is also the governor of the city. So he wrote to the chief of police, his name was Ishaq ibn Ibrahim. He writes him a letter saying to test all the judges and teachers and fuqaha on the issue of the creation of the Quran, and write back in detail what their belief is. So he's just going to ask them now. He was not at this point still not asked to force anyone upon this belief. So, and Al-Ma'mun didn't want the questioning to begin with the greatest level of scholars or the highest top scholars. He wanted it to start with the second level scholars. And so he named 7 specifically to Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the chief of police or the governor of Baghdad. And he gathered these 7 and he sent them to Al-Ma'mun. These 7 scholars were sent to Al-Ma'mun. And they had previously heard of the letter of Al-Ma'mun. So unfortunately, all of them said that the Quran is created. Because Al-Ma'mun sent the letter. All these 7 now, they said that the Quran is created. And they're trying to use the allowance that's for the Muslims. إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Except for the one who is coerced, forced into something, while his heart is still يعني مطمئن إيش نقول يعني content or with iman or full of iman still. So they said يعني we can say this, but in our heart we don't believe it. So the 7, they said that the Quran is created. They agreed to it. So Al-Ma'mun then sent them to Baghdad, and Ishaq ibn Ibrahim brought them and announced in front of the scholars and teachers what they told Al-Ma'mun, and they let them go. So then some responded and some agreed and some refused to respond whatsoever. And news of those who agreed from this second level, let's call them, of scholars, news of those who agreed that the Quran is the creation of Allah would reach Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And he was very shocked, especially with 3 specifically, that when they said the Quran is created, he was very shocked at them because he expected them to disagree and to refuse. And Imam Ahmad saw the seriousness now of the situation, that a large group of the first scholars failed and failed the first test. So now it was up to him and the scholars left to stand firm. So what does that mean? Yani, if, let's say, he wants to test the majority of the scholars in Iraq or Baghdad, and they all say, no way, the Quran is not created, then all the pressure will be distributed amongst all these people. But when a huge group of scholars says, yes, it's created, now you've got more pressure left on the smaller number left. And then if they agree, then the pressure will become harder and harder on the few that remain. So all of them should have refused collectively. And this is one of the things that encouraged the Imam to be more steadfast. He saw that so many people are breaking and saying, yes, the Quran is created. And he was very hard against the scholars who gave in and said the Quran is created. And he issued a fatwa saying those who give in and say the Quran is created, ahadith should not be taken from them. He should not take any ahadith from them as muhaddithin now. Don't narrate from them. And no one should sit with them, meaning to learn from them. Nor any fatwa should be written from him. And if he dies, the top scholars should not attend the funeral prayer. He's not saying they're kuffar. The believers can go and pray over them, but the top scholars should not go to their janazah, because he saw it very, very serious. Amongst them was Abu Nasr al-Tammar and Yahya ibn Ma'in, rahimahumullah. The fatwa applied to them. And Yahya ibn Ma'in, he visited Imam Ahmad one time. And Yahya ibn Ma'in, anyone who reads in books, you'll know his place, and he was a scholar and everything. But he made this mistake, and Imam Ahmad saw that he would sever his relationship with him. And it doesn't mean that for our sake he's a horrible person or anything like that, because he only agreed to it verbally, but he didn't really believe it in his heart. So there wasn't anything corrupt in any of his books or teachings or narrations. But Imam Ahmad, as a fellow scholar, saw that this was not acceptable, that you would say something like this. And so Yahya ibn Ma'in visited him one day while Imam Ahmad was sick. And he came into his room to visit him, and Imam Ahmad turned away from him and he refused to speak to him. Another, his name was Al-Huzami, he visited him, and Imam Ahmad, when he opened the door and saw it was him, he actually shut the door in his face. So he was very strict against those, and he refused to talk to them. And specific scholars, that he held them in high regard, that they shouldn't have said that, Others that, here and there said it, he didn't care much about them. But there were specific people that were beyond that. They shouldn't have said yes. And those are the ones that he was strict with. So those who gave in encouraged Imam Ahmad to stand firm. Because now he is going to carry more of the weight and the responsibility. So the fitna began, and the Khalifa gets a good response right from the beginning, because people easily accepted. So imagine the first group, or imagine the 7 scholars that he had sent to him, all of them said no. Every single one of them refused. He would have told him, okay, this is going to be like a big problem, and maybe I shouldn't go through with this. But all of them easily said, okay, yeah, sure, it's created. So that means it gave him the green light. It's easy, let's keep going with this. So he sent to Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, again we said there's the chief of police or the governor of Baghdad, and he tells him to start to test people and to write back in detail what each of them believed. So he brings, and this is an excerpt or part of the questioning that he had with Abul Hasan al-Ziyadi. This is one of the scholars. So Ishaq ibn Ibrahim asked him, is the Quran created? And Abul Hasan says, the Quran is the kalam of Allah, is the speech of Allah. And Allah is the creator of everything. And all that is other than Allah is created. You see what he's trying to do? He's trying basically just to avoid the problems. He's trying to use words that would just satisfy the guy without him having to say the Quran is created. So one more time, what he said was, the Quran is the kalam of Allah, the speech of Allah. And Allah is the creator of everything. And all that is other than Allah is created. You see? And then, but he continues, and Amir al-Mu'mineen is our Imam. And if he commands, we obey. And if he calls us, we respond. So what does it mean? It means that if you really push me, I'm willing to say what Amir al-Mu'mineen says. You see? And there were other scholars who said things like, they would say, the Quran. Watch my fingers, huh? They say the Quran. Then, and the Injil, okay? And the Torah, and the Zabur, all of these are created. Get it? Who got it? I'm saying my fingers are created. They said the Quran, and then they put the finger up for the Injil, with Zabur, with Torah, all these, and then they wiggled them, meaning all these fingers were created. And of course, they're just trying to get out of it, right? But the dumb rulers, of course, would see that and say, okay, he's with us. He didn't get that he's saying these are created. So they would agree, they would say, okay. So Imam Ahmad even saw that as unacceptable, because we're at a time of fitna now. And if all the great scholars start saying things like that, then the fitna was going to spread all over the ummah. So then Ishaq ibn Ibrahim tells Abul Hasan al-Ziyadi here, he asks him, specifically now, the Quran, is it created? And he repeats the same thing. The Quran is the speech of Allah, and everything is created by Allah, and everything other than Allah is created, and Amir al-Mu'mineen is our Imam. If he commands, we will obey, and so on and so forth. So then Ishaq ibn Ibrahim takes a letter, and he reads what's in it from Amir al-Mu'mineen, from the Khalifa, telling them that the Quran is the creation of Allah, and Allah doesn't speak, and so on and so forth. So Abul Hasan says, this is the saying of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim. After he reads the letter, he tells him, this is the saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So what do you say? So Abul Hasan says, that may be his opinion, but he should not force people upon it. But if you tell me that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I have to say or agree to it, then I will say so. He's saying, if he says, I have to say it, I'll say it. And this was still now the early part of the fitna. So Ishaq ibn Ibrahim says, no, he did not tell me to command you to believe in it, but he only asked me to test you. What is your belief? Then he asked Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah. He says, what do you say about the Quran? And Imam Ahmad said, it is the speech of Allah. I don't add to that. And then he says, is it created? He says, it is the speech of Allah. He says, what do you say of what is in the letter, meaning of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that Allah is not like anything in any way or in any meaning? And Imam Ahmad says, I say, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like him, and he is the all-hearing and all-seeing. So then, one of the people who were present, now this is on the side of the governor, he asked permission to speak. And then he said to Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, who's testing him, He is saying that Allah hears from an ear and sees with an eye. Taban, Imam Ahmad didn't say this, but he's trying to make it sound bad now. He's saying Allah hears with an ear and sees with an eye. So then Ishaq ibn Ibrahim asked him, what is the meaning of his saying, Sami'un Basir, in the ayah here? What does that mean? And Imam Ahmad says, he is as he described himself. And this is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. We don't fool around with the names and attributes of Allah. The way Allah described himself, we say this is how Allah is, and he is as he described himself. And Allah Azza wa Jal would know best, and he would describe himself, and for us to take it as it is. So Ishaq ibn Ibrahim tells him, so what does that mean? Like us, like we do, the way we hear, the way we see. And Imam Ahmad tells him, no, he is as he described himself. So now this is Imam Ahmad being asked for the first time, and he's being very direct and very blunt. He didn't play around and try to say, well, if you want me to say, I'll say it, even though it's not what I believe. He tells him very clearly, this is what we believe. So then the scholars were into groups. The largest group agreed that the Quran is created. Then there was a very small group, and it consisted of people like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who totally refused to say that the Quran is created. And then there was a group that said that the Quran is the kalam of Allah, but if Amir al-Mu'mineen commands us otherwise, we're going to say otherwise. This is a fairly sized group as well. For other examples of people that were asked, a scholar by the name of Ibn al-Bakka al-Akbar, rahimahullah, he was asked, is the Quran created? He says, no, the Quran is maj'ul. So what is he doing? He is playing off the ayah, إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. We have made it an Arabic Quran. So he's saying, they asked him, is the Quran created? He says, the Quran is maj'ul. Because now he's really saying what Allah said in the Quran. And hopefully the word maj'ul and the word created, made and created, are similar. It might get him off the hook with these people. So then Ishaq ibn Ibrahim asked him, is what is maj'ul makhluq? Isn't everything that is made created? And he said yes. So then Ishaq tells him, then the Quran is makhluq. Then the Quran is created. He says, no, it is maj'ul, but I won't say that it's makhluq. And he's just basically playing with words here, or trying to find a way out of it. But of course, at times of fitan, this is not acceptable. So then Ishaq sends a detailed account to Al-Ma'mun, who agreed, who refused, and who was in between willing to accept. And surprisingly, the response of Al-Ma'mun, which arrives 9 days later, he insults all the scholars. He accuses them of hypocrisy and theft and loving the dunya. And he accuses them harsh accusations. And his letter is preserved historically. And he calls them children, and they have no brains, and no this and no... And he it goes in one by one, attacking them. And these are people who said, if he says we're willing to say, you see how he's not respecting them? They said if Amir al-Mu'mineen commands us to say it's created, we're going to say it. And he doesn't respect them. But when it comes to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he has no insults about him. It's amazing that the people who are willing to obey him, he insults them, and the one who strongly says no, he respected him. Between him and himself, he respected him. He didn't call him a child or immature or loves the dunya. And he didn't respect the others who were willing to agree with him. He says, you guys love the dunya. And except for Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he presents no threat to him. He doesn't threaten him at all. But he says those who refuse to say that the Quran is created, strike their neck. This is his letter now that comes after 9 days. Those who refuse, strike their neck and beat them, and they are immature children, whether I mention their name or not. Because he insulted people specifically. He says if I mention them or not, beat them or kill them or strike their neck. And if they don't agree, then send them to me. And if they don't agree, all of them will receive the sword. This letter was written in 218, and towards the later part in the Hijrah. So then the scholars were gathered again with Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, and they were informed of the contents of the letter. So either they say that the Quran is created, or their necks will be struck. And the fitna starts to spread to all corners of the ummah. All scholars were questioned, and those who were refused were thrown into prisons. So the prisons of Baghdad then, instead of being filled with the drunkards, the thieves, the highway robbers, it was full of scholars. Scholars all over the prisons. And they started to respond one by one. They started to break down one by one and say, yes, the Quran is created, even though in their heart they don't believe it. And it's allowed, and there's a permissibility for them to say that to get out. Nu'aym ibn Hammad, rahimahullah, is one of the scholars and the teachers of hadith. He wrote 13 books in response to al-Jahmiyyah. So he's already responding to deviants like this. And he studied with Hushaym ibn Bashir, and the teacher of Imam Ahmad. And remember, the one that they got the idea of classifying the hadith from? So he studied with the best and the greatest of scholars, and the greatest of scholars narrated from him, and including Imam al-Bukhari and al-Nasa'i and others. And he was in Egypt, subhanAllah, this great scholar, Nu'aym ibn Hammad. He was in Egypt, and he was sent to the prison in Iraq. And he absolutely refused to say that the Quran is created, and he died in his chains in prison. So some of those who were very adamant and refused happened to pass away as well. So then, in the beginning, it was 26 scholars who refused. Okay, the brown avalanche, plate M28210. You're asked to move your truck. I don't know if it's towing or what but there's a brown avalanche outside. You're asked to remove the truck. So we said at first there were 26 scholars who refused, and as it got more and more difficult, only 9 remained steadfast. And then they were to be sent to the Khalifa, and they know the Khalifa, he's going to have them killed or beaten. He's not very sane guy. So only 4 remained, and of this 4 was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, a young man by the name of Muhammad ibn Nuh, and we're going to come to him again, a man by the name of Al-Qawariri, and Al-Hasan ibn Hammad. So when they were going to be sent to the Khalifa, the second 2 said, okay, the Quran is created. So only 2 people remain. Imagine, started with 26 scholars, then 9, then 4, and only 2. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and a young man, not even really a scholar, Muhammad ibn Nuh, who was a student of knowledge, and a student of Imam Ahmad, but like a top-level student. And back then, what they referred to as a student of knowledge is what we refer to as a big sheikh these days, kind of, to a degree. But not specifically scholar. So they were sent to Al-Ma'mun, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Muhammad ibn Nuh. They were sent to Al-Ma'mun. And on the way, in a place called Al-Rahba, something very simple, but it had a great effect on the Imam, happened. And this is narrated from Salih, the son of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Salih says, a man from the Arabs, from Rabi'a, came and asked, this is now, imagine the procession. You have Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Muhammad ibn Nuh, and soldiers and weapons and horses and all people from the government, taking them all the way from Baghdad to meet the Khalifa. So they reached this place known as Al-Rahba, and a man from the Arabs of Rabi'a came and he asked, which of you is Ahmad ibn Hanbal? He's asking this group as they're camped. So they pointed to Imam Ahmad, and he came to him. So Salih narrates, he says, so he greeted my father, and then said, Ya hada, O you are the representative of the people. Because people know now only 2 people, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Muhammad ibn Nuh. But Muhammad ibn Nuh is a young man, and nobody cares if he says yes or no. But Imam Ahmad is the only one, as a scholar, the only one left. So this man comes to give him this nasiha, or to advise him. So he tells him, you are the representative of the people, so do not let them down. And you're the head of the people today, in your place. So don't ever let people down by responding to what they're calling you to. So the people will respond, meaning, because if you say it, everyone else will start to say it as well. And you will carry the sins of all on the day of judgment. And if you love Allah, this is just now a simple man telling him this. Even those scholars were coming to him and telling him, Allah gave you ability to say yes and it's okay. And so this is now a man who's not a scholar. He tells him, if you love Allah, then be patient upon what you're on. For there is not between you and Al-Jannah except that you're killed. And it's very true. He's saying the only thing between you and Jannah is that you're killed. If that's what they're going to do to you, you're going to be killed. And he tells him, and if you're not killed, you're still going to die. You see what he's telling him? And he says, if they don't kill you today and you live for 20, 30 years, you're still going to die anyways. It's going to happen, it's going to happen. So he says, and if you're not killed, you're going to die. And if you live, وَإِنْ عِشْتَ عِشْتَ حَمِيدًا. And if you live, you're going to live in a praiseworthy state. So he's telling him it's a win-win situation. Okay? If they kill you, you're going to die anyways. Die if you love Allah, die for the right cause, and you enter into Jannah. And if you're patient and you don't die, you're going to live in a praiseworthy state. You're always going to be a hero in the sight of people. So he's telling him, both ways you're going to win. And if you're not killed, and if you live, you will live in a praiseworthy state. And then he tells him, Ya hada, O you, what if you're killed right here and enter al-Jannah right here? He's encouraging him. Wassalam. And he leaves. Assalamu alaikum, and he leaves him. That's it. So Imam Ahmad, he was moved by what he told him. So because now imagine, he is alone now, and not only alone, but all the other scholars, they said what they were, and they were telling him, why are you making things difficult on yourself? Khalas, just say it. So now this man comes and he gives them these words, and they inspire him. So he asked, who is that man? And they tell him he's a man from the Arab of Rabi'ah who recites poetry. His name was Jabir ibn Amir. Imam Ahmad says his speech was from that, or from what strengthened my resolve to stay steadfast in refusing what they were calling me to. So when they came close to the army of the Khalifa, so this is the last rest stop, or like the area just near the area of the Khalifa, a servant of Al-Ma'mun came to them. One of the servants of the Khalifa came. Imam Ahmad narrates. He says, he entered upon me while he was wiping away his tears with the edge of his garment, and saying, it is difficult for me, Ya Abu Abdullah, Abu Abdullah, the patronymic of Imam Ahmad. Verily, Al-Ma'mun has unsheathed a sword that he has not unsheathed before that. He removed the sword, took it out. He has never removed it before that. And he swears by his blood relation to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you know, the Abbasids, they were from descendants of Al-Abbas, from Al-Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib. So he's saying, and he swears by his blood relation to the Prophet ﷺ, that if you don't respond to saying that the Qur'an is created, that he will kill you with that sword. So the servant comes crying, because this is serious. He swore by Allah, and he's going to, or by his blood relation, that he's going to kill him with that specific sword if he refused to say the Qur'an is created. So then Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he got up to pray. And he prayed, and at the end he lifted his hands. And he says, my master, he's saying to Allah, my master, your patience and your forbearance has deceived this transgressor to the point of resorting to beating and to killing. So what is he saying? Saying, Allah, you're being so patient with this man. So he thought he was so powerful because Allah didn't stop him and destroy him. Allah is just being patient with him and forbearing, and that's why Allah didn't stop him and squish him in his place. But that patience deceived him to the point of starting to kill and to beat people. He says, Oh Allah, if the Qur'an is your speech and uncreated, then protect us from him. In another narration, he made dua that he would not see Al-Ma'mun at all. No sooner had he finished his prayer and put down his hands, people started yelling. They heard some noise, they heard some yelling. What was it? The news of the death of the Khalifa Al-Ma'mun. And whenever you study, dua, the etiquettes of dua and things that make your dua accepted by Allah, is that you eat halal food. Halal here, we don't mean zabiha, non-zabiha. We mean, not from a haram source. Okay, not from a haram source. All right? And so, always you'll find examples, the example of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and other righteous people as well, but they always put him as the example and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to respond to his dua. So now the Khalifa dies, he's dead before they meet him. So what are they going to do with them now? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and the young man Muhammad ibn Nuh. So they sent them back to prison until the new Khalifa decides what to do with them. And the new Khalifa is Al-Mu'tasim Billah. Al-Mu'tasim now, it's going to take him obviously a while until he gets into the position and settles things and takes over properly, and then he's going to look at the issue of the creation of the Qur'an. So what happens is that on the way back now, so these two men now, Imam Ahmad again being very thin and frail, this young man Muhammad ibn Nuh with the soldiers and the And they're in their chains, the guards with their weapons and the horses, leading them back to prison. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah says, I did not see anyone, along with his age and knowledge, who better stood firm for Allah's sake than Muhammad ibn Nuh. And he says, one day, Muhammad ibn Nuh said to me, Ya Abu Abdullah, O Abu Abdullah, Allah Allah. Allah Allah means Ya Allah. It doesn't mean Allah Allah. No. He says, so you just throw out, you leave the Ya. So Allah Allah, you are not the same as me. This is Muhammad ibn Nuh trying to give encouragement to the Imam. You are not the same as me. You are a man who is followed. And the people stretch their necks towards you. Meaning they want to listen to you, to see what you will do. So fear Allah and be firm for Allah's sake. And then he died and I prayed over him. So subhanAllah, this was a young man who was studying and he wanted to become a scholar and a narrator of a hadith, and he wanted to get married and he wanted to have children. But he's jailed because of something like this, and he dies with his chains surrounded by guards, and he is buried in an unmarked grave. And today even, no one knows where his grave is. Few people even know the name Muhammad ibn Nuh, but Allah Azza wa Jal knows his name. And that's all that matters. So, he says that this young man, he dies in his chains. Well, there is no mercy and no one has pity on them. And he stands firm for his religion and dies without his friends, without his family being around him. And he's buried in a strange land that he doesn't know. And now the Imam has to stand alone, firm against the fitna, traveling alone all the way to Baghdad with the soldiers and the floggers and all these. And he used to say that that prison is hated. As-sijn kurh. The prison is hated to us. And the chains are hated to us. And being whipped, is hated. Until now he hasn't been beaten. But beating is hated, but for the sake of Allah, it is all easy. And he was imprisoned in a house and then moved to a general prison for about 30 months or more till the Khalifa decides what to do. But totally he stayed for 30 months in this prison. And then what happened is that some scholars came to him while he was in prison. And they told him, Ya akhi, just say what they want you to say. And Allah gave you a rukhsa, an allowance to do that. So the Imam Ahmad replies to them, so what will you do with the hadith of Khabbab? When the Prophet ﷺ said, amongst those who came before you, a man would be sawn in half, but that would not cause him to abandon his religion. So then they gave up trying to advise him. And he said, I do not mind imprisonment since it and my house are the same. And he says, being in prison and being in my house, they're the same thing. Nor about being beheaded. I don't mind being beheaded either. But rather I feel the trial of the whip. You see? So he was afraid of the whip. And he's being very frank. He's not trying to be a hero that he is not. And this is one of the beautiful things. He would tell you when he was scared and when he was tired and when he was fatigued. So he's not trying to pretend that he's a hero. He said, I don't mind being killed. And I don't mind prison. It's just like sitting in my house. But what I do fear is the trial of the whip, to be whipped. So he says, a fellow prisoner heard him. And who was this fellow prisoner? He was a thief who had been whipped before. All right? SubhanAllah, scholars telling him, yeah, say it. And the thief now is encouraging him to stay said. So he tells him, don't be concerned, Ya Abu Abdullah. For it will take only 1 or 2 lashes. And after that, you will not notice the rest of them strike you. And this is, a lot of things are like that. A lot of punishments are most severe in the beginning. And that's why, wal-'iyadhu billah, some governments today, when they torture people, then they give them a day or 2 of good food and relaxation and things like that, and then they torture them again. Why? So they can feel it. It becomes more difficult. And punishment becomes more severe after a time of relaxation. Right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, what's the beginning of Surah Al-A'raf? القرية إلا أتاهم بأسنا بياتا أو هم قائلون. Except the punishment will come to them bayatan. Bayatan is overnight, like mabit. Overnight, or أو هم قائلون, from the qaylula, taking a nap. So why these 2 times mentioned? Why would the punishment would come at night or while they're taking a nap, because it would become most severe if a people of a village are destroyed in their sleep. It's more severe than in the middle of working and picking up bricks and rocks. And so, in the middle of the most intense relaxation of sleep or a nap, suddenly the punishment comes. It makes it more difficult. And this is one of the things, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, about the punishment of the hellfire, that it doesn't decrease after the first touch or the first instance. The millionth hour or the thousandth minute is the same as the first second of touching, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So this this thief now is telling him, Ya Abu Abdullah, don't worry about it. It's basically the first two lashes that you'll feel, and then the rest you don't really feel them as bad as the first two. So Imam Ahmad says, so it was said that Imam Ahmad felt at peace after this man gives him these words. And while he was in prison, a lot of things would happen. Like one time they brought him water with ice in it, and it's not ice wasn't an easy thing. They would bring it long distances, wrapped up and everything. And so it was for the Khalifa, it was for the rich people who could afford ice. So they bring him water with ice in prison. It's not like you just press the thing and it drops ice for you. So, and he would be very tired and very thirsty, or also sometimes fasting. And they brought him water with ice. So he asked them, do you have water with ice enough for me and everyone in prison? They told him no. So he refused it. He said, how can I drink water with ice while there are those with me who do not? And it's really unbelievable. And even these people, some of them were thieves and crooks, because there were no more scholars in jail now. He's the last one. Thieves, crooks, whatever they did. And he still cares that, how can I drink water with ice while they don't drink water with ice? And he refused. And his uncle, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who said Ishaq was one of the scholars, he entered upon him and he debated with him, and he would tell him, say what they want you to say, and that's when he would respond to him with the hadith of Khabbab. And so now Al-Mu'tasim comes into power. And Al-Mu'tasim was different. So we said Al-Ma'mun loved knowledge and loved scholars and books and things like that. And he loved discussion and debate in the beginning of his time. Al-Mu'tasim was different. Al-Mu'tasim didn't care for knowledge, didn't care for fiqh. He was strictly a soldier. And you'll see how unintelligent he was when we come to the debates later on. He was strictly a soldier. And he also took the views of the Mu'tazila, and he kept the same ministers and the same people in his government. Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad as his right-hand man, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim as the governor of Baghdad, or the chief of police. So now you're expecting now to get more difficult. At least the first guy understood knowledge and knew debating in books. This guy is just a soldier. And he just inherits this belief, and he has to remain upon it. And of course, Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad keeps encouraging him upon testing people upon this belief. طيب. So, excuse me. The imprisonment that we mentioned earlier, he was imprisoned in the house of Umara in Baghdad, in the stable of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, and who was the brother of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim. And he was very restricted in his imprisonment, and he even became ill in Ramadan. And then after that, he was moved to the general prison. And he would be in his chains, and everyone else, but they're not chained in prison, but he would be in his chains in his prison. And eyewitnesses would say, we saw him lead the prayer he would lead the people in prayer, but while he would be chained. And it's interesting, he was able to remove, there's an important point here. He was able to remove his foot out of the manacle, the brace on his foot. They were very heavy chains, by the way. And there were more cruelty later that would add more chains. Some of them had bricks, huge bricks, attached to the chain just to make life difficult for them. So an eyewitness says that he would take his foot out of the main chain, his foot, and sleep for sleep. So he's able to remove his foot and take it off, but he keeps it on. Why? Because the Amir put it there. Obedience to the Amir, even at a time like this. So the Amir decides I should be in prison, I'm going to stay in prison. I'm not going to try to break out. He decides I'm going to be in chains, I'm going to stay in chains, even though I can pull my foot out and remain free all day of the weight. But he would only take it off sometimes for salah and for sleep. So when it was the 17th of Ramadan, Imam Ahmad says, I was transported to the house of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim while I was chained with one chain. And every day 2 men would come to me. And they were Ahmad ibn Riyad and Abu Shu'aib al-Hajjaj. They were sent by the governor to talk to me and to debate with me. And when they finished, they would call for another shackle to add to those that were already upon me. And so there were 4 shackles upon my legs. And then he describes some of the debates. He says, the man asked me, so then the governor sent these 2 men to debate with him. Now this is part of what was said. Excuse me. He asked me, how do you say that the Quran is the speech of Allah, and Allah is not likened unto anything, and human beings speak? So he's saying, how do you say Allah speaks, and human beings speak, and Allah is not like anything? That means Allah doesn't speak because humans speak. So I asked him, do humans have knowledge? He said, yes. So how could Allah have knowledge? Now Imam is responding to him, how could Allah have knowledge? Perhaps you think that Allah's knowledge is created. And the man said, yes, Allah's knowledge is created. You see how the problem gets you into problems? He wasn't even thinking. He said, yes, Allah's knowledge is created. So Imam Ahmad tells him, Ya kafir, kafart, you have become a kafir. How could you say that Allah's knowledge is created? So Allah had no knowledge until He created it? And how did He create knowledge? How did He create it when He didn't have any knowledge? You see, it doesn't make sense. Yani. If you have no knowledge, how can you create your knowledge now? How can you create without knowledge? So then the messenger of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the governor, was standing. So he tells Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he got angry. He got angry because you're calling the messenger of Amir al-Mu'mineen a kafir. So he tells him, this is the messenger of Amir al-Mu'mineen. How could you call him a kafir? So Imam Ahmad says to the guard, he has said that Allah's knowledge is created. This is now, he's debating with supposedly scholars of the Mu'tazila. Imam Ahmad tells the guard of the prison, he said that Allah's knowledge is created. And Imam Ahmad narrates, so the man looked at the one who was debating with me in a way showing disapproval over what he said. The guard, just a guard now, he disapproved. How could you say the knowledge of Allah is created? So Imam Ahmad said, whoever thinks that the Quran is created, he is a kafir. And whoever thinks that the knowledge of Allah is created, he is a kafir. And whoever thinks that the names and attributes of Allah are created is a kafir. And he says this continued until the 4th night after Isha prayer. So now 4 days, remember 4 chains. Every day they would add to his chains. And he says the 4th night after Isha prayer, Al-Mu'tasim gave orders to Ishaq ibn Ibrahim saying, bring Ahmad ibn Hanbal to me. And so he was first taken to the governor, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim. This is before being now sent to the Khalifa. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal says, so I was taken and I was entered upon Ishaq. And he said to me, Ya Ahmad, Wallahi it is your soul. It is by Allah your soul, meaning you're going to be killed. He has sworn to kill you with the sword and to beat you severely and to put you in a place where you will not see sunlight. Or one narration says, neither the sun nor the moon. So Ishaq then said, okay, let me give it one more try to debate with him and to convince him that the Quran is created before I send him off to the Khalifa. Just one more try. He wanted to try his luck with him. So he says to him, did not Allah say in the Quran, إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا, we have made it. طبعا here it really means we have sent it down. So he says, have we not made it an Arabic Quran? So Imam Ahmad says yes. So then he tells him, جَعَلَهُ, he made it, is not anything that is maj'ul, created. Everything that's made is created. So then Imam Ahmad, how does he respond? And this is his first time to hear this argument. Immediately he responds, and has not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. The verse is talking about what? The army of elephants. Allah says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. So He made them, and at the end they resembled like a field of like eaten and trodden stalks, what they look like. So then he tells him, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ, about the people of Abraha. He said, yes. He says, then did He create them another time? You hear what he's telling him? He said, when Allah says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ, does جَعَلَهُمْ mean, if you're saying جَعَلَهُمْ means created them, so when Allah says فَجَعَلَهُمْ, does that mean He created him a new time, or created him looking like that? Is that what it means? So, do you understand the argument? So, did He create them all over again? And so Ishaq ibn Ibrahim was quiet. Because it makes sense. When Allah جعلهم كعصف مأكول, doesn't mean He created them كعصف مأكول. If Allah جعل القرآن عربيا, doesn't mean He created it as an Arabic Quran. So he felt as he's at his attempt, and he said, take him away, take him to meet the Khalifa. So Salih, his son, says, so my father was taken, and he narrates from his father saying, so I was taken, Imam Ahmad saying, I was taken to the place known as the gate of the garden, yani Bab al-Bustan. And with me on this trip was one of the top ministers of the Abbasid dynasty, and a messenger from Ishaq. His name was Bagha. And Bagha was a Persian. So he said in Persian, what do you want from this man? He's asking the guards as they're taking him to the Khalifa, what do you want from this man? So they said, so Muhammad al-Muharibi, this man, he said to him, they want him to say that the Quran is created. So Bagha, the simple messenger, he said, I don't know anything of these sayings. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and the blood relations of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He's a simple man, he's saying that's all I know. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and our Amir al-Mu'mineen, he has blood relations to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he's saying Tawheed and loyalty to the Amir. That's all that's required. Even this simple man is saying it. And Imam Ahmad is looking at this man in awe, saying, this is all that's required, why are they forcing people upon this belief? So inshallah we'll stop here. What we're going to do next time, we're going to start exactly with the first meeting between Al-Mu'tasim and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. We'll take the narration of a man, his name is Sulaiman as-Sajzi, and he basically, he knew some guard that had a relationship with him, and he found a way to the front row. And so he narrates the narration for us, and he was front row, and he witnessed Al-Mu'tasim and Imam Ahmad meeting for the first time. And there's going to be beating and whipping and all kinds of things. But inshallah, it will be at 7 o'clock next time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair for your attentive listening. Before we end, we want to say again,